Is your tea not tasting as good as it used to? It might have been stored improperly. How to store loose leaf tea can be a complicated subject. There are many different factors you'll want to avoid when it comes to storing tea, and we're going to explain what each one of them are. In this video, we're going to show you how to properly store loose leaf tea, and we'll also show you how to store loose leaf tea after you use it, so you can get multiple brewings out of the same leaves. These techniques will save you money and give you better tasting cups of tea. Let's get started. So when we talk about how to store loose leaf tea, we're talking about how to keep the tea in an environment where it's safe from degradation. Certain environmental factors can degrade the tea leaves over time and impact the taste. If you want to keep your tea fresher for longer, you'll want to learn how to properly store loose leaf tea. But what are some things that you want to avoid when you're storing your tea? When it comes to how to properly store loose leaf tea, there are four main factors you'll want to avoid when it comes to keeping your precious tea nice and fresh. They are as follows. First, we have light. Tea can lose its color and flavor when it's exposed to sunlight through a process called photodegradation. Green teas are especially susceptible to this, and the leaves will begin to take on more of a yellow color over time. The second factor is heat. When it comes to how to store loose leaf tea, another thing you'll want to avoid is heat. Excessive heat can damage the tea leaves over time, and that is why you'll want to keep the leaves stored in a cool or room temperature environment. Third, we have humidity. Humidity is another thing you'll want to watch out for when it comes to how to store loose leaf tea. This can get into the tea leaves and make them less fresh. Humidity can also make the tea more difficult to infuse, as you want a nice dry loose leaf tea to soak up the water and release the flavor. Finally, we have aromas. Tea has a remarkable capacity to absorb foreign aromas. If it's stored next to other foods that have a particularly strong aroma, it will inherit these smells and flavors. If you want to learn how to store loose leaf tea, one of the most important lessons is keeping it away from spices and foods. So now that we've covered some of the more common things you'll want to avoid when storing tea, let's get into the more practical tips and show you how to store loose leaf tea in a container. First, the container must be airtight. The most important consideration to make is that your container is airtight. If the container is not airtight, it can introduce heat, humidity, and aromas into the tea leaves, all of which have a negative effect on its freshness. Next, the container should be opaque. A lot of people store their tea in glass containers, and this is actually not a good idea. The reason is that light can penetrate glass, so the tea leaves are subject to photodegradation, which can impact not only the color of the leaves, but also the flavor of the tea. What you want to go for is an opaque container, like a metal tin, that does not let light through. This will allow you to avoid the photodegradation and keep your tea fresher over time. Lastly, and this should go without saying, but the container you use to store your loose leaf tea should be clean. Ideally, the container should be used for nothing other than tea. But if you are repurposing another container, make sure it's cleaned and sanitized. You'll also want to make sure that it's completely dry. You don't want any water in the container when you put the leaves in, otherwise they will be sitting in that humidity for a long time. So after reading this list of how to store loose leaf tea, you may start thinking that the fridge is probably the perfect place to store tea. It's dry, it's cool, and there isn't any light as long as the door is closed. While the fridge can be a decent way to store loose leaf tea, there are two very important things to watch out for. The first is moisture droplets. When loose leaf tea changes temperatures quickly, condensation can form. If you open a pack of tea that has been left in the fridge, small droplets can get on the leaves as the warm air interacts with the cool tea. These small droplets of condensation can increase the humidity of the tea, and as we mentioned before, this will degrade the tea over time. This is why you should really only use the fridge or freezer for tea packs that are already opened. Next, we have odors. Tea can quickly absorb odors, and there sure are a lot of them in the fridge. If you keep a lot of unpackaged food in the fridge, you may want to avoid storing your tea in there, otherwise it can really interfere with the flavor. So if you're looking for how to properly store loose leaf tea, the fridge is definitely not the best option, unless the packages are well sealed and the fridge is free of odors. What about storing loose leaf tea in the cupboard? The cupboard is where most people store their tea. This is a dedicated cabinet where dry food is stored. This area is usually dark, dry, and pretty cool for most of the day. The one thing you'll want to be careful about is the other food items that are being stored in the cupboard. If any of them have particularly potent smells, this can have an impact on your loose leaf tea. A lot of people keep tea in their kitchen cabinet, right above their stove or oven. Again, there are a few reasons why this is not the best place to store tea. The first has to do with heat and moisture. When you're cooking, you're introducing a lot of heat and moisture into the air. Because heat rises, this means that the area above your stove could be the hottest in the house. It's best to keep the tea away from the oven so you can protect it from all that heat and humidity. Also, we have the aromas and spices of the kitchen. Even if the tea is not in your spice cabinet, that doesn't mean it's safe from all those spicy aromas. When you're cooking, in addition to heat and humidity, you're also introducing a lot of aromas into the air, which can contaminate the tea leaves, especially if they're not properly sealed. So if your loose leaf teas are already open, just put them into an airtight metal tea container and place them into a cabinet that's away from the kitchen. What about storing loose leaf tea after use? After you brew the loose leaf tea, you can still brew the tea leaves another 3 to 8 times. Not only is this a great way to save money and get more tea from the same leaves, but each infusion is actually different in flavor, so you can really get to know the tea over time as you compare infusion to infusion. So how do we store this tea so that we can reuse it in the future? If you're planning on brewing the tea right away, you can just keep the leaves in the teapot and pour more water in. If you're going to be brewing the tea leaves more than a few hours later, it's important to learn how to store the loose leaf tea for reuse the proper way. Just take the tea leaves out and put them on a dry paper towel away from other odors. This will get the humidity out of the tea leaves and maintain their freshness for a few hours. Even if you use this method, you still want to use the tea leaves within 3 to 4 hours. If you leave the wet leaves overnight, it is the perfect breeding ground for mold and bacteria. If you left the tea leaves in the teapot last night, it's best to just throw it out and start again in the morning. If you want to try brewing loose leaf tea at home, we would really appreciate it if you could go to neoteas.com and browse our selection of premium, pesticide-free Japanese green tea. After traveling around Japan for the past few years, we've met with dozens of farmers and sampled hundreds of different types of teas. We've ultimately selected a small list of our favorites, and we're so happy to share them with all of you, with free shipping worldwide. Just try some out and let us know what you think. It would really help to support this channel. If you have any questions about green tea, please feel free to leave those in the comments below. But until then, we'll see you next time.